Lepore, there was a pretty big coaching change earlier this week in the Canadian division
There
as the
was.
Montreal Canadiens, the second favorite team of the GFP podcast,
We love the Habs.
decided to fire head coach Claude Julien and assistant
Yeah.
coach Kirk Muller.
Poor
Dominic
Kirk.
Ducharme taking over the Habs on an interim basis. Lepore, this is what I'm going to ask you, okay? Does this coaching change even matter for the Montreal Canadiens?
We're going to go right to that. Does it matter? You're asking with regard to, will it make this team better or turn this team around?
Yes. Will this team improve under Dominic Ducharme? Is that one move, just changing the coach, going to change the entire trajectory of this Montreal Canadiens team moving forward?
I mean, I don't think so. They've lost both games since they appointed Ducharme as head coach, one being in overtime, and both games to a good Jets team. But this whole firing, it's a broad topic because I'm sort of different here, and I'm sure I'll raise some eyebrows with what I'm about to say. I think this Montreal Canadiens team went into this season not necessarily on the same page as their fans and the media did. And what I mean by that is these are smart people running organizations, and the Montreal Canadiens are like they are a corporation and they run very well. Now, I think as fans and the media, we made mistakes in assessing not necessarily where the Canadiens are as a team and how they'll do, but kind of the direction the team will go, because they won that play-in round last year and put up a fight against Philadelphia. And I think that team goes into this year with some optimism, or the fans do, I should say, and they get off to a great start. And there was the mentality that this team was a legit team that was fully willing and able to make a run. But I don't necessarily think the management saw it that way. And I think this firing of their head coach kind of points to that. It's them saying, okay, Claude Julien was on a short leash. At the end of the day, if you're a team going into a season expecting A+ results and expecting a team that will make the playoffs and could possibly go on a run, I don't think you let go of your coach after a bad stretch. I mean, this wasn't a 20-game stretch where they were spiraling out of control. They had a bad week or so, and they were losing games, not looking good. And we've talked about Claude Julien on this podcast a lot, saying that we respect him as a coach and we think he's a very good coach. And that's why we wouldn't necessarily love the Leafs to play the Canadiens in the playoffs. But I think that firing signifies that they took a broader scope when it came to where this team was, and they saw where that team finished last year. That team was a 24th team in the National Hockey League last year. Let's not talk about them winning that play-in and having a good series against Philadelphia and getting off a start. Those are small sample sizes, even collectively. I think the organization knew what they were doing going into this season, and they see where this team is, and it's a team that's teetering on not being very good and being very good. But I don't think that the organization was all in, or I didn't think the organization was all in, and they showed it. Now, I'm going to go one step further. When they signed Jake Allen to that deal, the defense for that kind of contract was that their strength is goaltending, and they wanted to put more force behind their strength. Now, get ready for it. I think they signed Jake Allen to have an opportunity to trade Carey Price if they could.
Whoa.
Now, I don't think it means they're going to the decision was made to trade Carey Price, but I think they took a look at where this team was last year, being the 24th best team in the NHL. They signed Allen sort of as an insurance policy because they had the cap space. And then they go into the season thinking, let's see how it goes. But if we are, again, a team that's in the bottom third of the league, we have to make changes. The Montreal Canadiens cannot have multiple seasons of being in the bottom third of the league and changes not be made. I think most teams could say that. So what's your biggest asset? What's your biggest piece? Anytime a team wants to shake something up, they have to look to their biggest assets and see what they can get in return. I mean, when the Leafs did it, the first thing was, okay, where's Phil Kessel going and what are we going to get for him? We just touched on Johnny Gaudreau in Calgary. If the Flames really wanted to change things up and get a return on something, they'd have to do with Johnny Gaudreau. The Canadiens' best piece is Carey Price. And the way this team's built, they're in that in-between area where they're not going to tank, or I should say, based on like their cap and the players they pay, you can tell they're not necessarily fully going for it, and they're not necessarily a team trying to tank. So with Price as that piece and signing Jake Allen, I think Jake Allen served as an opportunity to, if they wanted to move on from Carey Price, they could, and still have goaltending stabilized. So I think you look at the way the season started for Montreal, very, very well, but they had a little stretch. They let go of their coach. And then you look at that signing of Jake Allen, and I think that organization is sitting in their office ready to make changes. And I'm not going to say they're ready to blow it up and tear it down and do a full-on rebuild. I mean, they signed Gallagher, or they re-signed Gallagher. They signed Anderson. They signed Toffoli. Like Weber signed long-term. I think this team is in a position where they can decide to go either way. And it's very smart, and it's very well done. We've talked about how the Canadiens have done a very good job, how Bergevin's done a very good job. I just look at the overall scope of it, and I think we may see some further changes with Montreal if the season continues to go the way it's going. And in the offseason, they're going to have to do a lot of looking in the mirror, because if this season goes poorly, I think that Carey Price card is going to get discussed. I'm not sitting here saying this team is going to trade Carey Price, but again, I think that signing of Jake Allen was to have an insurance policy if they want to move on from him.
There's so much to unpack here with the Montreal Canadiens, Lepore. I mean, I can go with this in so many different directions. And what I keep looking back on is something that you brought up, how last season, this team was the 24th ranked team in the National Hockey League. They would not have made the playoffs. Montreal Canadiens fans, there was no hope in hell that team was making the playoffs last season if the entire 82-game schedule had been played out.
They had two 8-game losing streaks.
Oh, it was a complete disaster last season. So they get lucky to get invited, as I say, to the playoffs last season. And they win the qualifying round series against Pittsburgh. And Carey Price was really good in the playoffs. He went from having a really mediocre, I would even say below average regular season, to being back to Carey Price in the playoffs. And Montreal Canadiens fans were loving life. They just beat Crosby and the Penguins in the qualifying round. They put up a decent fight against Philadelphia in the first round. So Habs fans going to the offseason thinking, here we go. We're back, baby. They trade Max Domi for Josh Anderson. They sign Tyler Toffoli. They bring in Joel Edmondson. And to Montreal Canadiens fans, it looked like, oh, wow, we're adding all these just fantastic pieces and we're building this great team. But when you actually looked at that team on paper and you took a step back and you looked at what had happened over the last, calendar year, the last couple of years, that team was still not very good. And I think their fans went into the season with this expectation that they were going to see the same team that they saw in the qualifying round. And when you still think about guys like, Jesperi Kotkaniemi and Nick Suzuki, they're still young guys.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, as good as, we've talked about Nick Suzuki and how we think he's going to be a really good player, he's still not there yet. He still needs time. And at the end of the day, I think one of the biggest problems with this team is their talent down the middle. So when you look at the Montreal Canadiens' top three centers, Nick Suzuki, Philip Deneau, and Jesperi Kotkaniemi, they have combined now for 7 goals in 20 games this season. How on fucking earth is that team going to compete with other teams in this Canadian division specifically? When you think about the center depth that all these teams have, when you look at Matthews and Tavares, McDavid and Draisaitl, even Calgary with Monahan, Lindholm, and Backlund, and then Winnipeg with Scheifele, Dubois, Stastny. And then you look at this Canadiens team, and Philip Deneau, I know is, he's taking a lot of heat right now in that Montreal market, and Habs fans are not happy with him. 0 goals in 20 games for Philip Deneau.
He hasn't scored a goal yet?
He has not scored a single goal this season, Lepore.
I knew they were shitting on him. I didn't know it was that bad.
Like, it's been really bad, but it's one of those things where it's like, first of all, Deneau was not who you guys thought he was. And it kind of reminds me of the Tyler Bozak, Phil Kessel era in Toronto, where Bozak was miscast as this number 1 center because he was best friends with Phil Kessel and they played on the first line. And, he was like a 50, 55 point player. And when I think about Philip Deneau, he's a good two-way center. We all understand, he's a good face-off guy. He's good defensively. This is not a guy that's going to produce, big numbers for you offensively. He is what he is. He's a 15 to 20 goal guy at best, a 50-point player. And I think Montreal Canadiens fans just, have these expectations about guys like Philip Deneau and even Nick Suzuki and Kotkaniemi. This team just isn't there yet.
Yeah.
And yes,
the potential's there, like you said, but yeah, we'll see.
And I like, some of the players they have when you sort of move down their roster and how they don't really have, a bad line, I guess. Everyone likes to say that, they're a balanced team and they have good players, up and down all 4 lines. But at the end of the day, I've said this so many times, they don't have the high-end talent to consistently generate offense. They just don't. And then when you add in how terrible Carey Price has been this season, and 88 save percentage in 12 games for a guy you're paying $10.5 million a year, who's in the 3rd season of an 8-year, $84 million contract. It's a complete disaster. And Lepore, you said it. I wouldn't be surprised one bit if they're right now trying to move this Carey Price contract, because as we've talked about on a previous show, that is going to be an anchor for this team moving forward.
And Jake Allen's playing well.
Like, Jake Allen's been awesome.
Yeah.
Jake Allen has been really good. Last year, Jake Allen was really good, and he makes a hell of a lot less than Carey Price. And you're paying a goalie who's 33 years old that kind of money, who now seems like he's on the decline. And listen, Lepore, if we get into the playoffs, right, and the Montreal Canadiens are, let's say, the 4th seed, and Carey Price just flips the switch, would I be surprised? No, I wouldn't, because he's Carey Price, right? You wouldn't be surprised if he just flipped the switch and did what he did last year against Pittsburgh, right? But at the end of the day, you look at his numbers over the last, 2-3 seasons, he's not the same guy that we remember, when Canada was winning gold medals and he was, up for the Hart Trophy and he was one of the best goalies in the world. He's just not there anymore. And do I still think he has the talent to return to that guy in brief moments? Absolutely, I do. But yeah, man, I don't know how this team addresses this moving forward with this massive contract, because I think that's going to just be a huge hindrance to them moving forward, especially when it comes to trying to add more talent throughout the roster. So yeah, Lepore, I mean, I don't know if you have any other additional thoughts on this team, but I just think they sort of are what they are. Mm-hmm. And I think they're sort of a middle of the road team. And I don't see this team seriously competing moving forward, especially this season.
Yeah, but like we talk about that possibility of maybe the Canadiens moving on from Carey Price, but we also emphasize how well Jake Allen's playing. So that it makes your wheels turn as to, okay, well, if they trade Carey Price and they free up that cap space, number one, what will they get in return for Carey Price? And then how could they fill that cap space? And they still have a good goalie in Jake Allen. So things could go very, very well for the Montreal Canadiens. Like we've said a million times on the show, they're very well built, very well structured. Bergevin's done an excellent job building that lineup. So they have to be evaluating it. They have to be evaluating it. And it's funny because we look at that contract and we talk about how it's terrible, but I always say it only takes one team. I mean, Price has, I'm sure, no movement, no movement clauses in his contract, but there's going to be one team that's going to make it happen. And I'm sure if the organization went to Price at the end of the day, players don't want to play for teams who want to move on from them. I'm sure Carey Price doesn't seem like that personality that he'd want to. But the Montreal Canadiens are going to be an interesting one, man. Very, very interesting, because you could see it going either way. Like, you could see both short-term and long-term, because if Montreal turned it around, like, we wouldn't necessarily be surprised. Like, I don't think they're going to win the division or whatever, but if someone told me they're still going to finish second in the division going a little run, I wouldn't be shocked. But if the wheels completely fell off, I wouldn't be shocked. And then let's say even if they did, finish decently this season and went out in the first round, these things we talk about major changes, would we be shocked about any of it if it happened? No. Because at the end of the day, teams are built certain ways, and they have to take advantage of things when they're going well, and things are going well for Montreal. So even with making the playoffs, I wouldn't be shocked at that kind of move come the offseason. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun watching Montreal. But let's be honest, man. Bergevin's got to cut his hair, though.
Oh my God. That flow is getting out of control with Bergevin.
He used to be the guy, like, well-dressed, amazing hair. He showed up to that golf tournament all jacked. But Berge, like, what are you doing with that hair? That's way too long.
It's a disaster. Yeah. But yeah, like you said, Lepore, one thing for the Montreal Canadiens, you have the most jacked general manager in the league. So at least you have that going for you.
Oh man, Bergie walking around downtown Montreal at the bars. He's doing well. He's doing well with the ladies for sure.
Must be going off.
He's doing. We don't know if he's married or what's going on, but he's getting more attention than the players, I think, in Montreal right now.
That dude is a weapon. He's an absolute weapon. Oh, man. But all right, Lepore, that's enough of this Montreal Canadiens team, the second favorite team of the GFP podcast, which I just wanted to mention one more time.